Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani, and we are live, which means the Steelers are still playing. They're down 38-29, so we will defer our Steeler coverage to a little bit later in this 30-minute segment. Instead, we will begin with some other topics first, which include the Pittsburgh Penguins, who lost again at home, and they lost the first period. That's been a recurring theme. Matt Murray's about ready to return. We'll get into that. We also have Pirate topic, and that will be our #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Here's your panel, left to right, television screen. There's actually one missing here. We have Andrew Fillipponi from the Cook and Pony Show to your left from 93.7 The Fan, and Jason Mackey, outstanding beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on the Penguins. Chris Hoke is here. He will join us here momentarily as we get into our football talk. But first, let's begin about Pirate Fest. As I said in the sportscast, it was attended by a lot of fans, but it was only one day. But there was no Andrew McCutchen, there was no Jordy Mercer, there was no Garrett Cole. Bob Nutting was at the Pitt game last night, but he was not at Pirate Fest yesterday. At least I didn't see him, and I've asked other people. I did not see him at all, which is kind of strange here. Andrew, I want to get your take on the Pirates based on this comment by Frank Coonley, who says every decision we make is to bring a world championship to Pittsburgh. Your comment on that, and do they support that with what they've done so far in this offseason and in previous?
Well, if they're so World Series centric, and that's what this whole vision or goal is all about, how can they have their leadership core, Coonley, Huntington, Hurdle, all in place with contract extensions when, frankly, they really haven't come that close to winning a World Series? So they don't conduct themselves at all like a franchise that is World Series or bust. If you look at their spending, they're in the lower half of the league, which is kind of a euphemism or a polite way of saying that they're cheap. So they don't know. They don't act like a World Series contender at all. The Cardinals and Cubs have made moves in the last 24 hours to make themselves better, and the Pirates haven't done diddly squat.
Jason, do you agree with that? I mean, I look at this and I see another comment. I'll throw this at you too, because I didn't understand this. We had Neil Huntington on the radio show, and I asked him, by the way, about their pursuit of Shohei Ohtani, the Japanese star who goes to Anaheim. And they said they put a full court press on with it, and that's fine. They should. But also, in order to get that acquisition, you had to put a $20 million fee. And I asked him, would you have paid that? He said, yes, we would have. That was part of the plan. And then you have this quote by the GM, Neil Huntington, who says, we would love Andrew McCutchen to retire a Pirate. We also want to win a World Series championship. At times, those two are contradictory goals. So how are they contradictory? Aren't you better with Andrew McCutchen?
They are better with Andrew McCutchen, but it doesn't fit business. With Andrew McCutchen, they're going to have a player that they're not going to be able to afford, and they know that. And I just don't think they want to explicitly say, we're not going to pay this guy. I think the lines that we should be reading between here is that we can get a package of much cheaper players if we trade Andrew McCutchen, but nobody wants to come out and say that.
Why not? Why shouldn't they?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, Pomp. If I were the Pirates, that's what I would do.
Do what?
Trade McCutchen and be honest about it. But we don't have the pieces in place to contend for a World Series, and we're kidding ourselves if we do. I think that quote by Coonley is incredibly disingenuous. There's no way they're competing for a World Series. I mean, look at what the Yankees did. They added Giancarlo Stanton. Look at some of the other moves that other teams in the National League have made, even in the American League. The Pirates aren't in the same solar system as some of these teams.
I mean, the ultimate rebuttal to Coonley is you won 98 games, and the next season your answer was John Neese and John Jaso, okay? That tells you everything you know about how this team prioritizes winning a World Series. To me, the McCutchen situation is this, Bob. If they trade him, if you thought fan apathy was high right now, what is it for next year without him on the team?
But what are you going to do? You know he's going to be traded, Andrew. I don't think there's any secret there. They have said that they're not going to at this point, but they certainly made him available last year. There were hot conversations with Washington. San Francisco's name came up. To me, I don't know why you just can't come out and say, look, this is the situation we're in. and be more transparent?
Because they want Pirate Fest. It was one day. It wasn't a whole weekend like in past years. To me, that's a tacit admission that the interest in the club is just not there. If you remove this face of the franchise, it's going to get even worse. So you have to do. There's a bargain or a dilemma there.
I do.
In my opinion, I think what they're doing. I think it's all PR. I think they're holding on to Andrew McCutchen until the start of the season so they can at least have some player that the fans will buy tickets to see, and then they'll trade him in June or July before the deadline.
Well, that's being disingenuous too, isn't it, Jason?
A little bit. Let me make one point here to what Andrew said previously, and I do want to give Huntington some credit because he did point out something that was rather smart in the Pirate Fest thing, saying the second extension for players with the same club, they're usually never kind. And he's right. I mean, McCutchen, there's no way McCutchen's going to sign a deal that is friendly to the Pirates. But I don't know if it's disingenuous. I mean, they're doing what's best for business at the gate, but does that help them win games? But no, it doesn't. So inevitably they're going to fail.
They also endorse a system that does not have a cap. They voted for the system that does not have a cap. They say in a perfect world their jobs would be better and their opportunities to win would be better with a cap, and yet they vote against the cap, Andrew.
Well, that's why I think it's really it falls on deaf ears when they kind of sing or cry the small market blues, because even though one team is not strong enough to change the universe, they signed up for this willingly because of all the money they're making. Bob Nutting likes this deal because of revenue sharing and the luxury tax and the things that trickle down to him that allow for him to make a lot of money. This is not like the small market hockey team that said, hey, if we don't get a salary cap in place here, we're going to go bankrupt. And now the New York Rangers don't have a team to play. They don't have a Pittsburgh Penguins on their schedule because we're not going to be able to field a team. We can't compete financially anymore. In baseball, the teams are making too much money to fight for a salary cap.
All right, we're due for a break here. We have some Steeler talk coming up. As soon as that game ends, we will get Chris Hoke involved with that. But next up, we'll talk to Jason, Mackey, and Andrew about the Penguin situation. And yes, it's early, and yes, there's a lot of hockey, but yes, they're also struggling in the first period of games, and it's a recurring thing. We'll talk about that and other Penguin-related items. When we come back, we're live, and this is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown on KDKA-TV. The #1 Cochran Sports Showdown is brought to you by #1 Cochran, Go One Better, and by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Have a greater hand in your health.